AM1450, FM 1033, KNSI's Ox in the afternoon at 4:08, 8 minutes after 4 o'clock. Good afternoon. Hour 3 feels like we just got rolling today.
Really has flown by.
Just a lot of interesting things to talk about today, and didn't get into a couple things that I wanted to. We'll save it for tomorrow, though. I'm excited about that tomorrow. I really want to talk about downtown St. Cloud. I was walking by the construction site where they're putting in that new high-end loft condo building in the old Dan Marsh drugstore lot.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, is that looking neat. I mean, it's just a big pile of dirt and the backhoe and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, they've got it dug up and
we
all
got
the
us a bona
equipment hanging
fide,
around.
yeah, we got us a bona fide housing project going on there.
Really cool.
Wow, after all these years. So hope and pray that goes well and is the beginning of a lot of great stuff like that downtown. So with that said, what would downtown look like? What should we plan for? How do we know? Is now the time to start planning for it, or do we wait and see if those things go like hotcakes, and that'll give us an idea of the momentum of downtown? I don't know. But that to be talked about, like I say, tomorrow. We live and work, or I work anyway, downtown, so I spend a lot of time down here. A lot of folks maybe don't, but for me it's top of mind. So
Sure.
We feel it, hear it, see it every day, and who knows what the town will look like in 10 years.
Yeah, and that is, we can't avoid that. We walk out the back door, and it's right there.
Right.
You can hear the work
half
happening.
the time the road's closed and alleys closed and all that sort of thing. But KNSI's Ox in the afternoon trying to keep up with legislative issues going on the state and national level. It's hard sometimes, as we had a legislative session that I think we tried to pay as close attention to as possible. And in the end, a lot of stuff didn't get done, went down to crunch time. Some things did get done. And now this weird 14-day thing has expired for the governor to do stuff with various bills that have been on his desk. And one of those bills was a tax bill, and I think we got a guy here that knows quite a bit about it. His name is Representative Jim Knoblach. Maybe you've heard of him. And, Jim, I appreciated what you sent out. I think yesterday it was a documentation of various elements of the tax bill and urging Governor Dayton to sign it because a lot of people worked on it. It was a bipartisan bill. So with that, Jim, what do you know? The governor, vetoed this bill?
Well, he did what they call a pocket veto. What does that mean? A pocket veto means that you've got 14 days to sign it, and if you just never sign it when the session ends, then it's automatically vetoed. And the 14 days ran out last night, so he essentially vetoed it without putting a big V on the bill.
Got it.
But, this bill did have a lot of really good stuff for a lot of people in it. I mean, it had tax breaks for people that get the working family credit, which tend to be working poor people. It had tax relief from property taxes for business owners, had property tax relief for farmers, had property tax relief for students. There was a student tax credit to take off against your student loans in this bill that he vetoed. There was a tax credit for veterans in the bill. There were just a lot of tax relief items for a very wide variety of people. And that's why the bill actually passed the House 123 to 10. Only 10 Democrats voted against this bill, with 50-some voting for it. So it was a very bipartisan bill. And Dayton, his excuse for voting against it, there were two. One is he said there was a little sales tax provision that he wanted. The second one was that there was a drafting error that potentially was going to cost the state $30 million a year. And, in the past, it's my understanding that these sort of errors have been fixed with just sort of a letter from the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader and the committee chairs saying, hey, it's an error, we'll correct it. But if Dayton really felt that, no, you couldn't do it that way, well, then call us back for a special session. In 1 hour, we'll be in and out. We'll have passed the bill, and it'll be done with. And he's refused to do that.
Yeah, so we know that's not a factor. It's pretty clear that was just something to try to make the Republicans look dumb. It was a political statement. And the real factor is what I'm trying to figure out the motivation, what the real reason is why he didn't sign this bill.
Well, I think he's trying to use it as leverage. It was interesting. The one major bill that did get passed this year is a bill I'm proud of. It was the supplemental budget bill that I had responsibility for, and that bill did get done. We passed it by a wide bipartisan margin in the House, the Senate, and the governor did sign it. But no sooner had the governor signed it when he said, well, yes, but we need to be spending more money than is in this bill. And so he came forward with another $80 million he wanted to spend on top of this bill. He said, well, we need another $200 million in the bonding bill. We did pass the bonding bill and a transportation bill in the House where I serve. I voted for both of those, but they didn't make it through the Senate on the last night of session. And so now Dayton says, well, what you did wasn't big enough. You got to spend more money. And so he wants another $200 million on top of that. And I think he's trying to use the tax bill as leverage now to get this other spending.
I see. Okay. Yep. So it's part of the overall game.
But I don't think Republicans are going to go for that. I mean, I guess from our standpoint, you know, the supplemental budget bill that I brought forward initially had no additional spending. You know, this is not a budget year. The legislature runs on a 2-year budget. We passed the budget last year for the next 2 years. This was supposed to be sort of a tinkering around the edges bill. Mm-hmm. The Senate Democrats came in and had $530 million of more money in it, whereas we were at a net of zero. We did put in a little bit more money for some things, cut some other things to balance it out, compromised at $100-some million of general fund spending. So, I mean, I think, you know, they came more than half our way, but, you know, it's still not enough for the governor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a weird game that is, quite frankly, I think it's beyond the average Minnesotan. In fact, probably 90% of all Minnesotans to really understand this. This is an internal game, and a lot of people, like the governor, have just been playing it too long, and there's too many people around him who've been playing it too long, and it doesn't make any sense. I don't think it serves the state well. Would you say, though, that it is a game that looks like he is proceeding from the assumption that the Republicans are going to go along with a special session?
Well, I think he would like to see that happen. Obviously, he would like the Republicans to cave and say, sure, we'll spend all this extra money.
Right.
I don't see that happening. I think what's going to have to happen here is somewhat of a cooling off period. I certainly think that, you know, there's some willingness to probably negotiate with Dayton, but there's also some hard feelings here of trust in that I haven't been personally involved in these conversations with the governor, but I know the speaker feels that he had a commitment that the tax bill was not going to be vetoed and used for leverage to get more spending, and now he feels that is what is exactly happening.
Yeah. So specifically, Representative Knoblach, talking about, you know, some of the things that were in the tax bill or that were in the bonding bill or something like, you know, things like that. I know that there are games being played, but in the tax bill, for instance, the idea of the Democrats wanting to raise the gas tax,
right?
You know, the 5-cent gas tax, right? Whatever. The Democrats wanting to raise other taxes. The Republicans saying, no, we're not going to raise taxes. There was, as I understand, you guys really did work together and compromised, gave up. I mean, the Democrats have to be credited, I think, in the House and even in the Senate for compromising and getting these bills drafted.
Well, they were from the standpoint that the reason we didn't have a tax bill last year is that Governor Dayton and the Democrats were insisting on a minimum 16-cent a gallon gas tax increase. That was actually going to be a sort of a sales tax instead of a so many cent per gallon tax like it is right now. And so 16 cents was the minimum set in law, but if the gas went up to $3.50, $4 again, you were looking at it being a lot more than that. And Republicans said, no, that's crazy. We've got a surplus. We don't need to be raising gas taxes 16 cents a gallon. No. And finally, the Democrats backed down on that.
Yeah, and or saw it. I mean, saw the light. I think the general public didn't want it. It was unclear why it needed to be so high, especially during a surplus year. It just wasn't computing for a lot of people, and I got to give them credit where credit's due to actually see that, be willing to come down from that. The other thing that is bothering me is that we're not hearing the straight story about what happened with the bonding bill, which is, I understand, kind of tied into the transportation bill in a weird sort of way. But I mean, it was, I don't remember this happening before, but whatever the case. And there are people saying that if the Senate, they tried a tactic too late, and that if they'd have had a little bit more time, they could have actually gotten this done. They tacked on the funding for the funding mechanism, whatever it is, for the Southwest Corridor light rail. The House said no. I mean, it wasn't part of the bill. You would have had to have redone it in the House. There wasn't enough time. They theoretically could have or did try to pull it off at the last minute, ran out of time. I mean, is that the straight story? Do you think that given a little bit more time, they would have come off of that thing and that we could have actually gotten that bill to the governor too?
I think.
Or is that propaganda nonsense?
No, I think that if they had a little bit more time, they could have done that.
You believe them?
But having said that, because I think that it would have only happened because there would have been Republican votes in the Senate to pass that bonding bill. There were a number of Democrat senators that basically said, we are not going to vote for a bonding bill. We're not going to vote for the transportation money in the bonding bill without this transportation funding mechanism to build this $2 billion Southwest Light Rail project. And so Senator Bach knew that he was going to have to get Republicans to vote for that bill. What really happened is, we passed the bonding bill in the House with an additional $300 million of transportation money in it for roads and bridges. We sent it to the Senate. We thought they were going to go ahead and then just pass it with Republicans helping out, since some of these Southwest Light Rail Democrats weren't going to vote for it. Then the Southwest Light Rail Democrats got this amendment put on. At that point, we were adjourning because we were getting awfully close to midnight, and we had done our work in the House. And then they put the amendment on. Then they decided, the House is already adjourned. We should take it off. But it was pandemonium, and they just didn't get the job done. And if they had gotten it done, they would have gone to the governor. I think he would have signed it, and we wouldn't be talking about all this.
See, and this was in conference, right? I mean, this was a conference committee bill that they were trying to amend in the Senate, right? I mean, it had already gone back and forth and back and forth and back and forth when the House finally voted on it late that night.
Well, it started out,
if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, there were a couple of different attempts at it. There was a conference committee on this, but it didn't come out as a conference committee report, because otherwise it wouldn't have been able to be amended like it was. And so it was kind of a last-ditch attempt to really get something done.
Okay, all right. So it was all right. So it wasn't as clear-cut necessarily, right? I mean, the Senate hadn't already gone along with this conference. In other words, it wasn't conferenced out. It wasn't like a normal conference committee bill. It wasn't
conferenced out. I mean, if you would talk to the Speaker, I think he would tell you that he thought he had an agreement with Senate Majority Leader Bach. Senate Majority Leader Bach, has different views on it. But in any case, we passed it in the House. It would have been really easy for them to pass it in the Senate, and they blew it.
Should have, and they should have passed it. I'm all for the Southwest Rail being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But to have it be, to have other things held hostage for people to have to go along with the Southwest Rail, I am not convinced. In fact, I'm convinced the other way, that there's way more opposition to it than there is support for it, even in the Metro.
Well, we've seen that, even in the Southwest Metro,
right,
there's a lot of opposition to it amongst Democrats.
It's not ready.
Forget about Republicans and independents.
Right.
I mean, it's just
it's not
very
ready.
Controversial project.
Well, I know that area rather intimately. I've lived in that area, and I know there are people that don't want metro stations and a rail line
in their backyard,
going through what is one of the most amazing metropolitan neighborhoods in the country. So when they were talking about building tunnels like underneath the lakes and everything, okay, we're actually having a conversation there. I could actually see that happening. Can't imagine where that money's going to come from, right? But so I'm just that's why to me it's a shame to see something that would serve the entire state of Minnesota go down in flames simply because of the Southwest Rail provisions in there that they're not ready for prime time as they are.
Yeah. And yet that's what happened. That's what really killed the whole thing.
Governor get his pre-K funding?
Well, yes and no. We gave him the amount of money he asked for pre-K, which was $25 million.
$25 million, okay.
But we didn't give him all the language and such that he wanted for it. It's not going to be like you're hiring union teachers to do this. It's basically the sort of language that we had in the bill last year when we had school readiness programs for pre-K and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So he got some money, but he didn't get everything he wanted.
Representative Knoblach, before we let you go, thanks for coming in, by the way, but can you tell us what it would take for you guys, the Republican majority, to agree to a special session?
Well, I would tell you on the bonding side, the governor wants $200 million more of spending. We had a bonding bill that was $900-some million. From my standpoint, let's kick $200 million out of the $900-some million bonding bill, and we can substitute in, some of the stuff the governor wants, and the size of the bill isn't going up, so I guess, I could go along with that. The other supplemental spending, it's a negotiation. I mean, I understand that people probably would be willing to do somewhat more, but remember, we passed a budget last year that, in theory, fully funded the state for the next 2 years. We gave some state agencies some additional funding this year, so to be giving, out even more funding, again, it's a negotiation, but there's not a lot of appetite for that.
Jim, thanks. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Appreciate you coming in. We'll be in touch, huh?
Hey, thanks, Ox.
All right, Representative Jim Knoblach in studio, clarifying a few things for us here, as the legislative session is only a memory now, and we'll see if there's a special one anytime soon. AM 1450, FM 1033, KNSI.